Before there were pharaohs, before there were pyramids, before there was a single hieroglyph carved into stone, there was the river. The Nile flows northward through nearly the entire length of Egypt, an almost impossibly narrow ribbon of green cutting through some of the driest desert on earth. Every single year, for reasons ancient Egyptians did not fully understand but deeply revered, the river rose, flooded its banks, and receded, leaving behind a layer of dark, mineral-rich silt across the surrounding farmland. This annual flood, known as the inundation, was so central to survival that the entire calendar was structured around its 3 natural seasons. Standing on the riverbank at dawn, you can see why the ancient Egyptians believed their homeland was blessed by the gods above all others. On one side stretches lush green farmland, fed by this single river. On the other, only meters away, lies harsh, lifeless desert. The Egyptians drew a sharp distinction between these two worlds, the fertile black land and the barren red land associated with chaos. Unlike many ancient societies, Egypt's flood cycle was remarkably predictable, allowing for stable, long-term agricultural planning across many centuries. Historians note that this predictability may help explain Egypt's unusual political stability, since a reliable food supply reduced social unrest. Boats moved constantly along the river's surface, since the Nile functioned as Egypt's primary highway. Far more efficient than desert travel, wooden vessels carried grain, stone, and passengers between settlements from Nubia down to the fertile delta. Egyptians developed a sophisticated understanding of the Nile, maintaining nilometers to track the exact height of each year's flood. This measurement determined tax assessments, with officials calculating harvest yields based on how generously the river had flooded. Farmers moved quickly to plant wheat and barley in the newly enriched soil, working with wooden plows pulled by oxen. This annual rhythm repeated itself for thousands of years, sustaining a civilization that would stretch across more than 3 millennia. A span of time so vast that the earliest pyramid builders were already ancient history to the pharaohs of the classical era. At the very center of Egyptian society stood a figure unlike any ruler in most other ancient civilizations. The pharaoh, believed not merely to rule by divine right, but to genuinely embody a living god upon the earth. This belief was not simply ceremonial flattery. Egyptian religious and political ideology held that the pharaoh served as the essential link between the human world and the realm of the gods, personally responsible for maintaining a cosmic principle the Egyptians called Ma'at. Ma'at was a concept encompassing truth, balance, and order throughout the universe. According to this belief, a pharaoh's failure to properly perform religious duties could genuinely threaten the stability of the entire kingdom, including the reliability of the Nile's annual flood itself. The pharaoh's daily life reflected this extraordinary religious responsibility. Each morning, ritual purification and prayer preceded any other royal business, performed either personally by the pharaoh or by high priests. Royal advisors, viziers, and regional governors managed the practical daily administration of the kingdom, though ultimate authority, at least in official ideology, rested entirely with the pharaoh alone. Royal succession typically passed through direct bloodline, and Egyptian royal families frequently practiced marriage between close relatives, including siblings, a practice justified through the belief that pharaohs, as living gods, should ideally marry within their own divine bloodline. Historians studying royal mummies through medical imaging have confirmed genuine evidence of health complications linked to this practice within certain royal families, though its cultural and religious significance to the Egyptians themselves remained undiminished across many centuries. Women could, in certain historical periods, rule Egypt directly as pharaoh in their own right, a notable exception within ancient world monarchy. Hatshepsut, ruling successfully for roughly 2 decades, stands as perhaps the most well-documented example, commissioning extensive building projects and trade expeditions during her reign, and sometimes depicted with traditional pharaonic symbols of male authority, including the ceremonial false beard worn by kings. The pharaoh's public appearances were carefully staged events, reinforcing the ruler's divine status through elaborate ceremony, including the double crown symbolically representing the unification of Upper and Lower Egypt, and formal processions accompanied by priests, officials, and military escort. Royal audiences with foreign dignitaries, officials, or citizens followed strict protocols of approach and address, with direct personal access to the pharaoh, remaining an extraordinarily rare privilege reserved almost exclusively for the highest ranks of society. Rising from the desert plateau at Giza, the Great Pyramids remain among the most recognizable structures ever built by human hands. They are also among the most persistently misunderstood. For centuries, popular imagination has depicted the pyramids as constructed by masses of enslaved people, driven forward under the whip. Modern archaeological evidence tells a genuinely different story. Excavations uncovered substantial worker villages, complete with bakeries, breweries, medical facilities, and organized burial grounds for laborers. These laborers were buried with genuine care and respect, including grave goods, near the very monuments they helped construct. Archaeologists believe the pyramids were built by a rotating labor force of Egyptian farmers, conscripted during the flood season. This system provided productive work for a seasonal labor force that would otherwise have remained idle for several months annually. Skilled craftsmen, stonemasons, engineers, and supervisors worked alongside this rotating seasonal workforce on a more permanent, professional basis. The precise engineering methods used to construct the pyramids remain an area of genuine ongoing scholarly debate. Historians agree limestone blocks were moved using wooden sledges and likely ramps, though the exact configuration of these ramps is not definitively settled. What can be stated with confidence is the sheer scale of the achievement itself. The Great Pyramid of Giza remained the tallest human-made structure on Earth for well over 3,000 years. It was raised using only Bronze Age tools and technology, coordinated labor, and an extraordinary depth of mathematical knowledge. Feeding and coordinating a workforce of 10 to 20,000 workers required a sophisticated logistical system. Centralized breweries supplied daily beer rations, and medical facilities provided care documented through skeletal evidence of healed fractures. This suggests injured workers received genuine care, reflecting the highly organized and respectful nature of this ancient engineering wonder. Away from the grandeur of royal monuments, most ancient Egyptians lived considerably more modest lives, within small farming villages scattered along the Nile. Typical Egyptian homes were constructed from mud brick, a cheap and readily available building material well suited to Egypt's hot, dry climate. Homes were generally organized around practical necessity, featuring a small number of rooms for sleeping and storage, and a flat roof for extra space. For families who could afford it, a small enclosed courtyard provided shade and space for various household activities. The daily diet for ordinary Egyptians centered around bread and beer, both produced from the grain harvest that sustained the entire civilization. Preserved dental evidence confirms bread formed a central part of the diet, though it also reveals significant dental wear caused by sand fragments. Beer carried significant nutritional importance and was consumed daily by all society levels, as the fermentation made it safer than untreated river water. Vegetables including onions, garlic, and leeks, along with fruits such as dates and figs, supplemented this grain-based diet. Meat, particularly beef, remained a genuine luxury reserved primarily for wealthier households and special religious festival occasions. Family structure centered around the nuclear household, though extended family members frequently lived nearby and maintained close practical and emotional ties. Marriage functioned as an informal social arrangement, though surviving documents confirm contracts specifying property rights did exist among wealthier families. Egyptian women held a notable degree of legal independence, with records confirming they could own property, initiate divorce, and represent themselves in court. This legal standing did not eliminate gendered social expectations, but it represented a more expansive position than many other ancient societies. Children began contributing to family labor from a young age, assisting with agriculture, learning a family trade, or receiving basic education. Surviving artistic depictions and toys like carved animals and board games suggest Egyptian childhood was not without genuine recreation and play. These elements reflect a broadly recognizable pattern of family life that endured across the long span of Egyptian civilization. Egyptian commerce operated without the kind of standardized coined currency familiar from later civilizations, instead relying on a sophisticated barter system. This was supplemented by standardized units of value used specifically for calculating fair exchange across different types of goods. At local markets scattered throughout villages along the Nile, farmers traded surplus grain for pottery, tools, textiles, or craft goods produced by specialized artisans. A standard unit of value known as the deben, equivalent to a specific weight of copper, allowed Egyptians to calculate fair value. This functioned similarly to how modern accounting might reference a currency value without literal cash, necessarily changing hands in every transaction. Skilled craftsmen occupied a respected position, with specialized workshops producing jewelry, furniture, and textiles for wealthy patrons and royal commissions. Archaeological excavation of the specialized worker village of Deir el-Medina has provided historians with an extraordinarily detailed picture of daily working life. Remarkably, surviving records document the earliest known labor strike in recorded human history, when workers upset over delayed grain payments refused to work. Even within a civilization built around divine kingship, ordinary workers understood and were willing to exercise collective economic leverage when they felt wronged. Trade extended well beyond Egypt's own borders, with expeditions traveling south toward Nubia for gold, ivory, and exotic goods. They also traveled across the Mediterranean for timber, particularly cedar wood from Lebanon, since Egypt possessed relatively limited domestic timber resources. Royal inscriptions describe expeditions to the distant land of Punt, bringing back incense, exotic animals, and valuable goods celebrated in temple relief carvings. Egyptian craftsmen achieved particular renown for their work in jewelry and precious metals, producing intricate gold and semi-precious stone pieces. Techniques including granulation and cloisonné inlay work reached a remarkable level of technical sophistication confirmed by surviving examples. Glassmaking demonstrates the civilization's capacity for technical innovation, with workshops producing colored glass vessels traded and admired well beyond Egypt's borders. Egyptian religion encompassed an extraordinarily large and complex pantheon of deities, numbering, according to some scholarly estimates, well over 1,000 distinct gods and goddesses. These deities were recognized across different regions and historical periods. Ra, the sun god, represented one of the most consistently significant deities. His daily journey across the sky was understood as a genuine cosmic event, essential to the continuation of life itself. Osiris, god of the afterlife and resurrection, held deep significance connected to Egyptian beliefs about death and existence beyond physical life, while his wife Isis became a widely worshipped goddess, associated with magic, motherhood, and protection. Temples functioned as major economic and administrative institutions, controlling land and employing priests, craftsmen, and laborers. Ordinary Egyptians were generally not permitted access to the innermost sanctuaries, which were reserved for the pharaoh and high-ranking priests. Despite this, religious practice was deeply woven into daily life through household worship, protective amulets, and popular festivals. Small household shrines and amulets intended to ward off illness or dangerous animals appear consistently in archaeological excavations. Magic and religion were not separated. Spells and prayers often overlapped in surviving papyrus texts. Egyptians sought protection through religious devotion, magical ritual, and practical medical treatment to maintain cosmic balance. Religious festivals provided occasions for public celebration. Statues of deities were carried in procession, allowing ordinary people a rare visual encounter. These occasions combined devotion with music, feasting, and communal celebration, providing a break from the rhythm of daily labor. Among the most respected professions available within ancient Egyptian society was that of the scribe, a position requiring years of dedicated formal education and granting access to genuine administrative influence largely unavailable to the broader illiterate population. Egyptian writing developed across several distinct forms over the civilization's long history. Hieroglyphic script, the elaborate pictographic system most familiar to modern audiences through temple and tomb inscriptions, was reserved primarily for formal religious and monumental contexts. For everyday administrative and personal writing, scribes instead used a simplified cursive script known as hieratic, written considerably faster using reed pens and ink on papyrus, a paper-like material manufactured from the pith of the papyrus plant that grew abundantly along the Nile's marshy banks. Formal scribal education began at a young age, typically for boys from families who could afford to forego their labor contribution. Students practiced writing extensively, copying traditional texts, religious literature, and practical administrative documents under the strict supervision of experienced instructors, with surviving educational texts revealing that discipline was considered necessary. Once fully trained, scribes served in an enormous range of roles throughout Egyptian society, managing tax collection, overseeing large construction projects, maintaining temple and palace records, and serving as personal secretaries to wealthy officials. The economic and social advantages of scribal literacy were significant enough that texts explicitly encouraged young students toward the craft. These texts pointedly contrasted the comfortable working conditions of a scribe against the difficult physical labor of farming or military service. Papyrus itself, along with Egypt's remarkably dry climate, has preserved an extraordinary volume of ancient written material. Surviving papyrus documents include detailed medical texts, legal records, private letters, and substantial literary works, offering historians remarkably direct, personal access to ancient Egyptian thought and daily concern across thousands of years. Beyond formal duties, scribes frequently produced personal writing that offers genuine emotional insight into daily experience. Surviving letters exchanged between family members reveal ordinary human concerns, worry over a sick relative or affection between spouses. These fragments, preserved by the dry desert, offer direct, unfiltered access to the actual emotional lives of ordinary people. Ancient Egyptian medicine represented one of the most genuinely sophisticated healthcare systems of the ancient world, combining practical anatomical knowledge, herbal treatment, and religious ritual into a coherent, if by modern standards, unusual, medical practice. Surviving medical papyri, including detailed surgical procedures, anatomical descriptions, and treatment protocols for a wide range of ailments, reveal Egyptian physicians possessed genuine practical medical knowledge, developed through direct clinical observation across many centuries of accumulated experience. One significant surviving medical text describes surgical treatment for various injuries with a level of clinical, almost case study style detail that modern medical historians find genuinely remarkable for a document created well over 3,000 years ago, including honest documentation of cases judged untreatable, rather than presenting exaggerated claims of guaranteed successful treatment. Egyptian physicians achieved genuine specialization within their practice, referencing distinct practitioners focused specifically on eye conditions and dental problems. This level of medical specialization would not become common again in much of the world for many centuries following Egypt's own civilization. Herbal treatment formed a substantial component of practice, with texts documenting the therapeutic use of numerous plants and natural substances. Modern pharmacological analysis has confirmed some possess genuine medicinal properties relevant to the specific conditions ancient physicians were attempting to treat. However, many treatments combined effective herbal remedies with magical incantations and religious ritual, understood as equally essential components. Mummification, while a religious practice, required detailed anatomical knowledge of the human body to carefully remove internal organs. This practical anatomical experience likely contributed meaningfully to the broader medical knowledge Egyptian physicians brought to the treatment of living patients. Dentistry addressed a widespread health concern, given the significant dental wear caused by sand and grit, commonly present in ground flour. Surviving skeletal evidence confirms Egyptian dental problems were both common and, at times, severely painful. Archaeological findings include evidence of attempted dental treatment, though it remained less effective than the civilization's broader medical achievements. From surgical skill to specialized care, the legacy of ancient Egyptian medicine remains a landmark in the history of human healing. Ancient Egyptian belief regarding death and the afterlife shaped an extraordinary portion of the civilization's art, architecture, and religious practice. Egyptians dedicated enormous resources toward ensuring successful passage into what they genuinely believed would be a continued existence beyond physical death. Central to this belief was the practice of mummification, an elaborate process intended to preserve the physical body as a necessary vessel for the spirit. Reserved for wealthy Egyptians, the process typically required 70 days, involving the removal of organs and drying the body using natural natron salt. The body was carefully wrapped in layers of linen bandages, often accompanied by protective amulets placed strategically within the wrappings themselves. Successful passage required the deceased's heart to be weighed against the feather of Maat, the goddess of truth, in a final judgment ritual. Surviving funerary texts reveal a tradition deeply concerned with ethical conduct during life, as a prerequisite for a successful eternal afterlife. Tomb decoration reflected wealth-based inequality, with the wealthy commissioning elaborate tombs filled with valuable grave goods intended for use in the afterlife. In contrast, ordinary Egyptians received simpler burials, sometimes limited to basic desert burial without the elaborate mummification available to the elite. The absolute pinnacle of this belief was seen in the massive pyramids and rock-cut tombs of the pharaohs, representing immense funerary investment. Grave goods included furniture, tools, and small carved figures known as shabti, believed to perform labor on behalf of the deceased. This reflects a civilization genuinely optimistic about the continuation of a meaningful existence beyond death, provided proper preparation and conduct were observed. The Book of the Dead was commissioned to guide the deceased safely through the dangerous underworld journey toward final judgment. These texts offer a window into how religious belief intersected with family wealth and social status, even in securing eternal life. Ancient Egyptian civilization endured, in various political forms, for well over 3,000 years. It was an almost unimaginable span of continuous cultural identity that few other civilizations in human history have ever approached. This remarkable longevity did not mean the absence of genuine change, political upheaval, or periods of significant weakness. Egypt experienced multiple periods of political fragmentation, foreign invasion, and internal conflict throughout its long history. This included eventual conquest by Persian, and later Greek, forces under Alexander the Great, followed by centuries of Greek Ptolemaic rule. Before Egypt's final absorption into the Roman Empire following the death of Cleopatra, the last active pharaoh of Egyptian lineage, even under foreign rule, core elements of Egyptian religious and cultural identity persisted for centuries. Egyptian temples continued active worship of traditional gods well into the Roman period, declining only with the spread of Christianity. Traditional hieroglyphic writing itself eventually fell out of active use and out of all living human understanding for well over 1,000 years. Its meaning was lost until the discovery of the Rosetta Stone in the early modern era provided the crucial linguistic key. Modern archaeological and scientific study of ancient Egypt continues to expand our understanding significantly. Advanced imaging and genetic analysis of royal mummies are regularly refining or overturning previously accepted historical assumptions. This reminds us that our understanding remains incomplete, with new evidence still emerging after 2 centuries of modern research. Egypt's cultural influence extended well beyond its borders, shaping later Greek and Roman thought regarding architecture, religion, and governance. Modern fascination was sparked significantly by the discovery of Tutankhamun's largely intact tomb in the early 20th century. It continues to sustain enormous ongoing public and scholarly interest nearly a century later. Few ancient civilizations have managed to remain so consistently present within global popular imagination for so many generations. Standing today before the Great Pyramids, or walking through the preserved tombs of the Valley of the Kings, Visitors encounter structures built by a civilization that was already looking backward toward its own ancient traditions. They look back with the same reverence modern visitors now direct toward Egypt itself. The scribes, farmers, priests, and pharaohs who once walked along the Nile's fertile banks built a civilization so enduring. Its monuments have now outlasted not only their own empire, but numerous entire civilizations that rose and fell in the centuries since. The river still flows, the desert still waits patiently on either side, and the stones the Egyptians once raised toward their gods continue to stand silently for anyone still willing to walk among them and relive what they were once so carefully built to remember.